evening and welcome to the People's Platform. Recently, the UNDP launched its flagship Human Development Report for 2025 titled AI in Action from National Vision to Global Human Development. Now, envisioning Sri Lanka's digital transformation also means that it needs to be inclusive and have legal and ethical safeguards and be rights and dignity centered. Where are we on this journey? Let's find out. I'm so pleased to welcome to the studio Azusa Kubota, Resident Representative, UNDP Sri Lanka. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening.
I'm also pleased to welcome Dr. Romesh Ranawana, former chairman of the National Committee to Formulate an AI Strategy for Sri Lanka. Good evening and welcome to the show, Dr. Ranawana.
Good evening.
Azusa, I'd like to start off with you. When we speak about a human development report, it is basically a document that explores how human development approach helps navigate pressing challenges and emerging opportunities. Taking a look at the 2025 Human Development Report, speak to us about some of the key global trends that have been identified, given that inequalities have increased the world over.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Sonali. So if we look at the picture that the 2025 report paints, it's not very uplifting. We are at a crossroad. That's the main headline. Why? Since 1990, UNDP's flagship report has been measuring a composite indicator called Human Development Index, which looks at human development from a very holistic approach, looking at health, education, and quality of life, basically income. For the last 30 years or so, we have been progressing. We have been seeing growth trajectory, and by 2030, we thought we'll be moving into the space of high human development index. Then we all know the pandemic hit. For 2 consecutive years, we saw a dip. Then 2024, we started seeing recovery. So that's a good picture, but the not so good news is that the recovery pace has not been the same as before. So we are progressing very slowly. On top of that, in 2024, we saw a widening gap between the high HDI countries and low HDI countries. For the 4th year, we've been growing this gap. Why? Because the pandemic really exposed the vulnerabilities of low HDI countries that did not have the buffer to bounce back. They are regressing, and the countries that had the margins to reinvest in recovery, they recovered much faster. So we are seeing inequalities growing between the nations, and we are also seeing growing inequalities within the nations, as is the case in Sri Lanka.
Let's speak about some of the trends for Sri Lanka as well. Where does Sri Lanka fit in?
Sri Lanka has been a beacon of hope in South Asia region for many years. It's one of the only HDI countries in the region, following Iran. Well, we don't know what would happen to Iran after the conflicts emerging there. But the point is that after the pandemic, Sri Lanka did not recover very quickly because of the economic shocks we had. Sri Lanka has had successive crises, and that's really shown and reflected in the HDI. The gap between Sri Lanka and other South Asian countries is narrowing, meaning other countries are catching up very, very fast. For example, the Maldives. So in terms of the ranking, Sri Lanka's ranking fell by only 1 place, from 88th to 89th out of 193 countries. But I want to say that the Human Development Index is not about competition. It's really about creating a space in the nation to have a dialogue around why it's happening and what can be done differently or more or less. So looking at the Sri Lankan situation, if we take into account inequalities, so we have an index called Inequality Adjusted HDI, Sri Lanka's percentage point, the rank drops by 19%, which means that Sri Lanka is becoming one of the most unequal nations. The latest data shows that the richest 1% holds 20% of wealth. So when we do have unequal society, it does undermine human development and sustainable development. And this was also revealed in the multi-dimensional vulnerability index that the UNDP worked with Oxford University in 2023 based on a national-wide survey, that when 58% of the population is estimated to be vulnerable, they have no cushion to fall back on. They have no buffer to withstand any external, internal shocks. So we have to build the resilience of the families and the individuals to bounce back. And when we have a growing inequality in the nation, it overall undermines national development agenda. So that's really reflected in the HDI at the national level as well.
Dr. Ranawana, you were the chairman of the National Committee to formulate an AI strategy for Sri Lanka. Now, the UNDP's flagship HDR also aligns closely with Sri Lanka's ongoing efforts to advance its digital and AI priorities. We see how much of the world is unsuspectingly embracing the utility that comes with artificial intelligence. My two-pronged question, the first question of which is, speak to us about the incredible opportunities and benefits that come along with AI.
That's a really, really interesting question, because what we're seeing with AI is all the talk that's happening with AI is actually quite new. It's only the developments that have happened maybe over the last couple of years that we are seeing this massive change, this massive opportunity for impact. The field of AI has been around for 78 years, but it's only in the last 2-3 years with the launch of systems like ChatGPT, Gemini, that this technology has been brought to the masses. And what this technology has done is that it has taken away the complexity of technology from using probably the most powerful tools in the world. Earlier, to use these type of tools, to be able to have a conversation with an AI, to get it to analyze some data, get you to search 1 million documents and extract, you needed to write code. You had to be a technical expert. But the difference that we've seen with the advent of these new technologies, especially this new technology called large language models, is that it allows us to interact and use these systems using natural language. And that opens up all the power of the AIs that have been built up over the last 30-40 years, all the technology, to non-technical experts. And this is where the impact is. From making information available, to be able to ask questions, to help students study for exams, to understand a particular concept, for a farmer to know when he or she should fertilize, for a fisherman to know what's the best time of the year to go out, which areas they should go into. Those type of systems required a certain technical expertise to use and to access. And what these new technologies have done is they have democratized technology to make it available for anybody to access them. But especially within the Sri Lankan context, to make them even more democratic, to make them even more accessible, what's really important is for us to also focus on the local language aspect.
Right.
A lot of these systems have been built in the West and they are trained on Western data. It's one of our responsibilities on one side to influence these companies to also bring in the local relevance, but also whenever necessary to develop those local language technologies in-house to bring these technologies to the masses as well. But really, I think the big benefit we are getting from this is the democratization of technology. And I think the opportunity here for Sri Lanka is the fact that this technology is only 2 years old. All countries around the world are just starting on this journey. We have the chance to leapfrog and be on par with the best in the world, because no other country is really that far ahead in terms of public services, education, so on and so forth. And even if those countries who are ahead, they're only 2 years ahead. So I think this is an opportunity for Sri Lanka to leapfrog and to address some of these inequalities that Azusa was talking about, which we'll talk about in a bit.
Sure. Along with the opportunities come the risks and the need for regularization, for legislative oversight. How is Sri Lanka faring in this respect?
There have been discussions on this, and the legal community, there is a committee under the ICTA who is developing a white paper to look at how we should approach the regulatory roadmap. And the current approach is, if you take AI regulation around the world, there are two extremes. There's one extreme that we see in the EU, where they've created this AI law, and it regulates just about anything to do with AI.
Right.
Then on the other side, you see those countries which are doing almost no regulation on AI, like the US, China. And what we are seeing is that on one side, there's a lot of safety and assurance for the public in Europe, but also we are seeing a drastic reduction in innovation and growth in those countries because the regulation is holding back that innovation. But on the other hand, at the other extreme, there are also dangers being posed by data protection, personal information, all that. What we are proposing is that we take a soft approach, somewhere in between, where we don't propose a specific AI law as such, but Sri Lanka already has lots of laws which address 80-90% of these concerns, from the Personal Data Protection Act to the Cyber Security Act. What we are proposing is that we look at those laws, identify the gaps that our current laws do not cover, and we look at bumping up these laws to try and cover those areas, but not get to a point where we are regulating AI to a massive extent, which will also hold back the development of our country. So we got to take a very pragmatic approach. But with something like AI, it's very hard to come up with a law that looks forward for the next 10 years. This technology is moving so fast.
Sure.
We need a very, very agile approach to how we implement these laws, because new dangers, new opportunities are becoming available not every few years. These days, it's like almost every week. So being very agile in how we approach the laws is also very important. But I think at our stage of development, it's very important not to be too rigorous on how we regulate, but still ensure those protections for society on the bad side. So it's got to be a balance.
Absolutely. And also, Dr. Ranawana, I think it's really important to have these conversations around education in terms of AI fluency, which is age appropriate from school level to university level and vocational centers. These conversations are not being had at the moment sufficiently. That is,
I feel, a big problem in Sri Lanka at the moment. I mean, let me just go back a few years. If you go back 20 years, to get a job maybe in the late 90s, early 2000s, all you needed to do was have a degree and be literate. But that quickly changed when all officers, all jobs took in an IT component. You needed to have digital fluency of some sort, send an email, write a Word document, prepare a PowerPoint, work with Excel. Those have now become mandatory skills. To get a job, you need to know language, maths, and now you need to know IT. Already, we are seeing this in our companies. When we interview people, we now also test their AI skills.
Right.
And there's a lot of misunderstanding among society that all you need to do to use an AI is to go onto ChatGPT and write a prompt. That is extremely dangerous, because AI is what's powerful, and also the weakness of AI is that if you don't tell it exactly what you want, the AI goes and makes a lot of assumptions on those things that you haven't said, and then it can go out and do its own thing. So to use AI effectively, on one side, you need to be able to specify exactly what you want from the AI, which is prompt engineering. But then on the other side, when it produces an output for you, you got to be able to read it. You got to use your discernment to understand whether it's correct, whether any corrections have been made. So that whole part of, number one, knowing how to instruct an AI, number two, how to use discernment and knowing when AIs can go wrong, also knowing what you should be using AIs for, what you shouldn't be using AIs for. That whole subject of AI fluency is absolutely important for anybody who uses an AI. And this is something I think that every Sri Lankan, just like now we teach everybody to use Microsoft Office, email, do a web search, that part of education I think is going to become more and more imperative, going all the way down to the school level. And that conversation, like you rightly said, is something that we should be having. Already countries like the US, China have made AI education mandatory for students all the way down from grade 2. And it's become national law. And I think this is a chance for Sri Lanka to leapfrog on that front. Digital, I think we were a few years behind. And we are still catching up with the other countries on digital literacy. But I think with AI literacy, this is opportunity for the nation to be on par with the rest of the world.
Sure. Azusa, the UNDP has been a key stakeholder in supporting Sri Lanka's AI strategy as well as overall digitalization efforts. It's so important that AI adoption in Sri Lanka is people-centered and dignity-centered. Speak to us about some of the initiatives that UNDP is a part of.
Sure. Just going back to the skills, for example, right? How do we invest in the people and the infrastructure? I think going back to the school education, right? Before going there, we have to make sure we have the right teachers who can teach, right?
Correct.
They are not trained in that way, right? With the subject matter that is changing so fast. How about access to internet, access to electricity, right? AI is very energy intense, right? So we need to invest in the ecosystem first, and also we need to inform all segments of the society, not only men and women, poor and rich, rural and urban, but young and old. I think young and old is one segment of the society or divide that might be creating AI divide. It's not the digital divide, AI divide, if we're not careful. And also involve people in the policy making, law making, so that they are made aware, but their voices are heard. So in a nutshell, the key message is that if we make the right choice, the title of the report, if we make the right choice in strategy, policy, ecosystem, then we can make AI work for the people, not to replace them. You have spoken a little bit about people's fear of being replaced by AI. And if we look at the global survey data, actually, people are in general very excited about the potential of AI in creating new jobs and augmenting their productivity and intelligence. So if we take a very positive approach and take that spin, how can we make it work for us, not against us? So those 3 I's I mentioned, invest, inform, and involve, those are the areas that UNDP is very much involved in working with national stakeholders. Capacity building, capabilities, regulatory framework, but we are also doing some prototyping, showing how this will be applied in actual digital projects. For example, we are working with the government on the vital statistics registration, right? There are important moments in life: death, birth, divorce, marriage, and people are entitled to have certification produced very quickly. But we all know, Sri Lankan colleagues and friends know, it takes time, and there's so many data entry points. But bringing 10 plus institutions together to streamline, so that at the end of this initiative, by having interoperable systems and also creating an ecosystem, the issuance of the certification time will be reduced by half. So this is really the power of digital, isn't it, in terms of improving service provision for the people of Sri Lanka. So that's one example. We are working on AI strategy. National AI Readiness Assessment was the foundation to design that strategy. We are also working with the justice sector to introduce digital platforms so that the information transparency will be enhanced. We also work with CIABOC in digitalizing e-asset declaration system and also the case management system. This is not only for improving service provision, but also enhancing the efficiencies and building the trust of people in those institutions by reducing the risks of corruption and misuse of information.
Azusa, you earlier alluded to the UNDP's earlier report on multi-dimensional vulnerability. When we speak about a Sri Lanka that is moving towards digital transformation, we need to ensure that nobody gets left behind. Given the fact that a part of our population is multidimensionally vulnerable, what mechanisms must key stakeholders adopt to ensure that we bridge these divides?
It's a very complex question, but first to be aware of the risks of divide. I think be conscious of that is very important. And going back to 3 I's, invest in the ecosystem, which is inclusive and equitable, and inform particularly most vulnerable ones of the possibilities, but also the risks, and also inform them of the skills required to navigate those new opportunities, and also involve them in policy making. So I think these 3 I's should be the pillars of our engagement. But coming back to the digital divide, I think there's a gender consideration, definitely. There's already a growing digital gap between men and women, and when it comes to AI, more men are using AI applications than women. So there's already an existing divide. AI engineers, I know it's male dominated, right? So the views and perspectives and data provided are very much male dominated if we are not very conscious and careful. And when it comes to young and old, this is one area where I would like to share the correlation between AI, digital, and the well-being of people, right? Traditionally, we are aware of this U-curve shape where we all have a midlife crisis where in the 50s, we hit the rock bottom in the happiness indicator, right? Then our happiness level goes up. But now we are seeing a different trend, meaning that young people are suffering from well-being. And we believe, according to the survey, it's linked with their early exposure to digital devices and online space. In UNDP, we are working a lot with national stakeholders in monitoring hate speech, misinformation, discrimination on online space, and it's particularly against women and young girls. Hate speech is on the rise. It's called technology-facilitated sexual gender-based violence. So apart from the technology part of it, we have to also protect young people. And there's a study in the report that shows that if a child is exposed to mobile phone or digital device younger than the age of 13, he or she is likely to have mental health issues. But of course, today we can't stop a young child from having access to mobile phone. It's everywhere, right? So how do you protect young people while exposing them to the latest technology so they will not be left behind? And this is a choice, policy choice that we have to make at this point, and also build an educational system so that we would have a population that is fit for purpose, but also have well-being and happiness protected in today's very volatile world.
Dr. Ranawana, your perspectives as well?
Technology is, I think it's the two sides of technology, like Azusa pointed out. These technologies, just like any new invention, just like any new technology, there's always a good side to it and there's a bad side to it. And more often than not, the good side is so vast, the benefits you can get from them are so great that you can't really block that technology from going forward. It's the same with so many different things like the internet, nuclear power, you name it. There's always a good side and a bad side. So it's always about how you use it and the ethics and the governance that you put in place on how the technology should be used. And this is extremely challenging. Like Azusa said, we have this already happening with digital devices, social media, but we're also seeing a massive impact due to school children using these AI tools. There's a study I read last week which found that about 80% of all high school students in the US use these AI tools to write their essays. And this is extremely concerning for me, because once again it comes back to that whole point of AI fluency, where the students are not being taught how to use these systems ethically and to actually magnify your performance, not to get away with getting the AI to do something for you. I'll give you an example. I still do a lot of coding. I do a lot of programming as part of my job. And now a job that used to take me 3 months to do earlier, I can get done in like 2 days. And the level of program, the level of code that I write is on another level. I would have never been able to produce that level of code on my own. But the reason I can do that is because I've already spent 25 years of my life writing millions and millions of lines of code. So I can instruct the program what to do. When the program gives me something, I can go through it, I can correct it, I can keep refining it. But the problem I'm seeing now is that the kids and even the younger workers in our companies are using AI to get the work done, but they are not gaining that on the ground experience on how to do it themselves. I have always advocated this, that it's very dangerous to get an AI to do something that you don't know how to do yourself, because you have no idea what the AI is doing. And how to strike that balance is really, really important. How the younger generation is going to gain that on the ground experience when there is something very easy that they can do already, that's easily available, and they can write an essay, write a report, do a data analysis. It's all there, and there is no compulsion for them to go and do it themselves, open up a piece of paper, write it down, work it out, brainstorm. It's not happening. So really, right from the younger days, and I don't know the answer to this, but for me, AI is a collaborator. I work alongside it, but I tell the AI what to do, not the AI telling me what to do. That level of AI fluency needs to be brought in from the ground up. If not, we're going to have a lot of problems going forward, because we're going to have an entire generation who really doesn't have that on the ground knowledge to get things done.
Sure. We are in conversation with Azusa Kubota and Dr. Romesh Ranawana. We're going for a short commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. AI is transforming the way we live, work and connect, but are we really ready for AI? We're in discussion with Azusa Kubota, Resident Representative, UNDP Sri Lanka, and Dr. Romesh Ranawana, former chairman of the National Committee to formulate an AI strategy for Sri Lanka. Dr. Ranawana, one of the concerns pertaining to AI is that it'll probably take our jobs. And to that, what do you have to say?
I think that is a very, very valid concern, but I see three sides to this. There are certain jobs that will be replaced. I think there's no getting away from that. Every industrial revolution, digitization led to certain jobs going away. And how we are going to deal with that problem, how we are going to upskill that particular segment of society, keep them viable employment, is a challenge that we need to address on a national level. But a bigger concern for me, or an equal concern for me, is the second segment, which is just about every job in the world is also going to be augmented with AI. This, just like every job now is augmented with digital, computers, mobile phones, the internet, a big part of every job going forward is going to be how you work alongside AI. I've heard this phrase so many times where you're not going to be replaced by an AI, but you're going to be replaced by somebody who knows how to use AI better than you.
Okay.
And that is already happening in our companies. So a big part of the national upskilling drive, both within the government sector, within the private sector, is how to upskill all your existing employees to make the most out of AI, how to work alongside AI, how to partner with AI. And then the third segment is, like you said, there are always going to be new jobs created because of this. There'll be people who will be building these AI systems, managing these AI systems, governing these AI systems. Those jobs are yet unknown, but we need to start creating those skill sets for the people who start to move into those roles. And the quantum of people that we have in Sri Lanka who are AI engineers, machine learning engineers, data scientists is still not enough to meet the potential demand that we're going to have for these roles in a year or two. And that, I think, is also something we need to look at. So three aspects I think we need to look at.
Sure. Azusa, from within the UNDP, how have you been managing this challenge?
Well, I think in the private sector, a lot has been happening. But as a public institution, we have long realized that AI is there. AI is here to stay. We have to learn to embrace it. So corporately, we have launched a program called AI Sprint. Everybody has to go through that AI training. And as managers especially, we have dedicated the boot camp type program to make sure all the leadership understands the potential of AI, but also to integrate AI in programmatic work, given that digital and AI have been identified as one of the key enablers in our global strategic plan that supports all the programs in 170 countries. So if we don't understand, of course we are not an AI engineer, but if we don't understand the potential of it and come up with a policy proposition and the programmatic offer to our program countries, we won't be able to walk the talk. So of course we have a large digital team in our regional office and headquarters and spread around all over the world. Those are the technical specialists and advisors who work very closely with AI committee and the national counterparts to share experiences from different countries. And given that this is a fast moving subject matter, we see the importance of keeping this global network intact and very active, and we are drawing expertise and knowledge from that network. But in order to be able to offer that, we have to be able to speak the same language, and we are investing a lot. And this is something also the public sector in Sri Lanka should think about. If you want to augment intelligence in a way to serve the people, sure, and come up with the policies and regulatory frameworks that would work for the people, everybody in Sri Lankan society has to be able to understand and speak the AI language.
Dr. Ranawana, when we talk about harnessing AI for inclusive development, how should this be reflected in strategy? Because we are seeing part of the private sector being proactive in accounting for AI. However, we haven't really seen the same sort of enthusiasm in the public sector. Especially in government departments and agencies, we are lagging behind in this respect. So what more does Sri Lanka, what more should Sri Lanka be doing?
I think as a foundational and a fundamental priority, AI in Sri Lanka should be human-centric and inclusive. And what I mean by that is, what AI should try to do is to address those inequalities that currently exist in Sri Lanka. Take, for example, education. There's a massive inequality in education based on which district you're in, whether you're in a metropolitan area or a rural area, whether you're in the hill country. And that's because of resources, lack of teachers. There's a big gap there. Using technology like AI is one way to somewhat bridge that gap. You're not going to be able to fully bridge that gap, but there are certain schools in Sri Lanka which don't have computer science teachers or mathematics teachers. And now, because of the tools that you have available in AI, and luckily mobile penetration in Sri Lanka is not too bad, and I think we have about 50-60% of our population has smartphones now. Through a smartphone, you can easily enable an app where a student who is not getting the support that they want on, say, a subject like maths can get that support with a mobile phone. And once again, not have to write programs or code, you just talk to it like you're talking to a teacher, to a tutor. And that's the type of attitude that we need to take on how we approach where our investments in AI go, to really bridge that gap, those inequalities that we have. There are similar inequalities in the health sector, for example. The hospitals that you have in Colombo and the diagnostic tools that they have, and the diagnostic tools that they have in some of the rural hospitals. I know there's a big investment that needs to go on to really do this at large scale, but we can still go maybe not 100% of the way, but maybe 30-40% of the way with a mobile phone and an app on a phone. And that should be how we address this, how we start that journey. And then on the other side, how do we make things like government services more inclusive? You got two sides to the government services. One side is that interface, the front end that you have on the system, how to make it, how to process documents faster, how to process applications faster. Sri Lanka does not have the money to hire, to triple its government sector to do these services faster. But AI is a solution for that. And then on the back end, the processing that goes on in the offices, how to process documents, summarize, run through that whole workflow. Once again, we don't have the money as a nation to scale to the level we need to give everybody that level of service that we need, and AI is a solution there as well. So it's really on how we prioritize and look at this on a national level, how we move the chess pieces back and forth, but make sure that anything we do is human-centric and also inclusive.
Azusa, if we talk about some of the sectors that stand to tremendously benefit from the inclusion of AI, one of it is the Sri Lankan legal system, where there's a massive backlog of cases. Justice delayed is justice denied. What are your perspectives on this?
Well, I think there are many sectors that would benefit justice sector, health, education, I think big potential areas. But when it comes to justice, I think Dr. Romesh talked about the automation of some of the routine exercises and translation, transcription, interpretation. Those are the tasks, human tasks that are very progressively automated. I know some AI ventures that have come up with an application that can even predict what a human would say. So, you know, AI is actually ahead of us, right, in some cases. So building on those examples, given that Sri Lanka is a multilingual society, and it's not always easy to make services available to different segments of society in a timely manner. Perhaps introducing AI tools in court systems that might also expedite the language barriers and issues that may contribute to the delayed justice dispensation. But in the health sector, I think Dr. Romesh already talked about some potential areas, like, we talked about the possibility of radiologists, losing jobs, but they haven't actually. There's now a global shortage because the technology have been augmented to the extent we can never replace human intelligence, right? The AI, I think, passes the medical exams better than human beings, but people still need to have doctors to have a human-to-human interaction, right? So AI would never replace human beings completely, but as already been said, we have to make sure that we invest in areas where our capabilities are augmented.
Sure. Earlier on in the conversation, Azusa spoke about the gendered implications of AI. Dr. Ranawana, I'd like your perspectives as well on this. In a time where AI is transforming the way we live, work, and connect, there's an author, Laura Bates, who in her new book, The New Age of Sexism, explores the gendered implications of emerging technologies from deepfake pornography to AI girlfriends to cyber brothels, sex robots, and the metaverse. I've read some of this book, and it's truly, truly frightening. Speak to us about how AI has the potential to, and is also currently increasing this divide between the genders, where women are facing the brunt of male violence and oppression, which has now moved on to the metaverse. And this is really scary because already across the world, we're seeing the effects of violence against women. How would you respond to this?
I mean, this is a foundational problem with AI. And to understand the reasons for this, you got to go back to how these AI systems are built. And every single AI system is built using data, previous data, historical records. And the problem is that if the historical records are biased, we ran this simple example. We took about 10 different image generation tools, and we said, draw me a picture of a doctor. 9 out of 10 times, the picture was of a man. I said, generate a picture of a nurse, and once again, 9 out of 10 times, it was a woman. Similarly, if I said, generate a secretary for me, it was a woman. And the reason for that is that there is one of the big problems with AI is that historical memory. All AI systems are built on data which preceded that AI, and if the data had a bias, then that bias is always going to be translated into, and this is where the governance aspect comes in.
Sure.
We looked at some of the newer fields like data scientist, and we said generate an image of a data scientist for me, and that was like 50-50.
Right.
Because it doesn't go back 10, 20, 30 years where society and literature and imagery and magazines were biased at the time. And one of the big problems with AI is that it can amplify historical bias, and once it comes into the system and people use it, that also amplifies how people think about it and things like that. So there have to be certain regulations on how these systems are governed, how bias is governed, and this is where the regulation aspect is also very, very important.
Sure. Can I build on this point? Absolutely. Because I think if we look at where the AI has advanced, right, where the big data comes from, it's basically led by countries where AI investments have been made, right? High HDI countries wealthy nations, right? So unless Sri Lanka is very conscious about building the AI data foundation that works for Sri Lanka, that is more culturally aligned, reflective of the realities of Sri Lanka, we would always face this challenge. But for that, data sharing, availability of data across the segments of society, and this is where also regulatory framework comes in, right? We're not always very open to sharing data across institutions, but maybe this is time to take another look at it to make sure Sri Lanka has its own AI data foundation that works for Sri Lankan society.
And let me add to that, one very good trend I've seen with AI is that if you look at a lot of these new AI models which first came out, they came out of companies which had proprietary systems like ChatGPT, Google. But now more and more what we're seeing is most of the systems that are gaining popularity are open source systems, which means that those systems are now open to public audit. Anybody in the world can go into these systems and test it themselves. So that I think is a very positive trend we are seeing in AI, where it's becoming more open, and the demand now is for more and more of these open source models, which anybody can go into, dig in, understand what's happening, over the more proprietary closed models. So I think that's a step in the right direction.
Sure. In conclusion, what is the way forward for Sri Lanka and its digital transformation journey, specifically with respect to AI, and what safeguards and measures must our policymakers take now in order to ensure that this journey is a positive, inclusive and equitable one? And I'd like you to also focus on the ethics and governance of bringing in AI, the digital trust, inequalities, data sovereignty and infrastructure. I'd like you to focus on these aspects when you answer the question.
I mean, like we talked about earlier, this is an opportunity for us to leapfrog. Every country in the world is still a year or 2 years down this journey. And this is an opportunity to make sure that Sri Lanka as a nation has an opportunity to leapfrog and come on par with most of the countries in the world. Of course, we do lack in infrastructure. We have to make those investments, but the beauty of the way that AI works now is that through the cloud systems, through all the systems that we have available over the web, the investments that we need to make to leverage AI are nothing like the investments we have to make for digital transformation, at least to get us 50-60% of the way there. To bring in the inclusivity, the local aspect, there are lots of investments which need to be made. For this to happen, to actually make national change with this, what we've seen around the world with all examples is that those countries which were able to leapfrog in AI, except for the US, which has all these big tech companies which lead the charge, all the other companies which were able to make a big step up in digital and AI was where this was a national program. They didn't look at one or two isolated applications, but looked across the board from infrastructure, data, skills development, awareness, training, and the legal aspect as well. So it's got to be done as a national program where, I mean, I've got this in my company. If you look at my table, I've got maybe 300 requests for AI systems on my table that people ask. But I just don't have the capacity to build all 300. Maybe I can build 4 at once. So I got to go through those 300 and pick those 4 or 5 which I feel have the biggest impact for my company. Not for one division or 2 divisions, but what has the greatest impact for the whole company. And this type of attitude is also needed for AI investments as well. We got to do things on a national level, but also big focus on using AI to solve the inequality problem. I think that's the direction we need to do, but it's got to be led at a national level.
Sure. Azusa?
Yeah, I think Dr. Romesh talked about leapfrogging in AI, and I like to say that this is a moment for us to realize that if we use AI, we can leapfrog in human development and sustainable development. So far, we have seen linear growth, in HDI.
Okay.
But if we make the right choice, make bold but people-centered choice now, we can actually jump the queue. We are very new in this. This is the moment for Sri Lanka to really catch up years of lost development due to a confluence of crisis.
Yeah.
And if we put our minds together, come up with a whole of society, whole of nation strategy, we can do this. And I think the moment is right now. And we are well positioned. We are a high HDI country. Youth are eager, digital savvy. Government has clearly said digitalization and poverty reduction are the key priorities of the national program. Private sector is eager to join hands.
Sure.
So I think stars are aligning. We just have to make the most of this moment.
Beautiful. What a beautiful conversation. Thank you both. Azusa Kubota, Resident Representative, UNDP Sri Lanka, and Dr. Romesh Ranawana, former Chairman of the National Committee to formulate an AI strategy for Sri Lanka. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching us. We'll see you again next Friday. Good night.